Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Delighted, first of all, to see that there's so many people online. We're just having a little bit of a connection issue now. I just saw a message from you. Can you hear me now? Can you put something in chat? Okay, of course.
We're all in one office here, so it's okay.
Okay, thanks, Carmen. And I would also want to check that Clemens, you're already at your end?
Yes. Ian and I are also in the same room.
I'll turn on my microphone so Michael can join us too.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. I'm excited to set the advantage of doing it in the summer time that people have a quieter schedule. So welcome again, everyone, to this webinar. I want to say a few words on the context on why we're doing this. So the work on the developing a common validator has started some 2-3 years ago under the Inspire Maintenance and Implementation work program, where we've initially worked with a number of member state experts defining abstract test suites for the technical guidelines that we have in Inspire to define how to test the requirements in these technical guidelines. And this is an important thing to note, is that basically one of the first things that we discussed with the experts in this group was that basically the foundation for a common validator in Inspire would need to be the technical guidelines rather than the implementing rules, which are the legal obligations, because ultimately the legal obligations can only be checked by lawyers or in front of the Court of Justice if it's coming to the question whether somebody is meeting their legal requirements or not. So the only thing that we thought can be sensibly or practically tested, because that was basically the scope of this work, was to base it on the requirements in the technical guidelines, which are providing one possible way, the preferred way of implementing the prior legal requirements, but it's just the only way. So that's one important thing to remember for this work. We've then basically contracted PricewaterhouseCoopers and Interactive Instruments to develop, based on the abstract tests that have been defined for the technical guidelines, an executable tests, let's say, and a test framework that could run these executable tests, and what we refer to as the common Inspire validator. Now, the contract is now coming to an end. We will shortly be releasing the results of that work as a version 1.0. It covers a number of tests for the download service, Atom feeds, and WFS, for metadata, for the, let's say, the older guidelines, version 1.3, and for the Annex 1 data specification. And because we're basically covering only those components up until now, further work will need to be done to come to a complete coverage of all the Inspire components, so the remaining services and the 2 and 3 data specifications. And that's why we wanted to present to the wider community how to actually go about in developing additional tests, in the hope that some of you or your colleagues will be interested in helping us to complete a picture over the coming months and helping us to develop further tests that are still missing. I should also say that we have recently agreed with the Maintenance and Implementation Group, the MIG, to change the mandate of the subgroup that has been supporting this work to us with the further development and the maintenance of the existing tests. So it is an ongoing work that will continue over the next year or so to continue this development of the common validator, but it will focus basically on completing the picture and to correcting anything that is basically maybe not entirely correct or should be changed in the current implementations. I think with that, I'll close here. Maybe just one other piece of information. This is not meant as an introduction to the overall validator, but we basically assume there will be the people on the call will have some basic familiarity with this tool and with the work that has been done. If you are new to this and don't really have any information about the current validator status, we will make available to all participants after the call maybe some introductory slides that basically present the work that has been done so far. But the focus of the webinar today is really just to give a short update at the beginning of the recent developments and additions to the validator that have not yet been released to testers and to the public, but then to focus most of the webinar on actually explaining on how to develop additional tests, taking some examples from the data specifications, from method testing and from service as well. And with that, I would hand over to our presenters today, Jens, Jon, and Clemens, please.
Thank you, Michael. Before giving the floor to Clemens and Jon, who will be the first part of this webinar, just some small practicalities. May I ask everyone who's not actively speaking to mute their microphone in order to limit the amount of background noise during the webinar. We will foresee at certain intervals during the webinar moments where you can ask questions. So if you have questions, raise your hand by clicking the little hand button next to your name on the right-hand side of the screen. We'll then work through the list of people with questions. And first of all, we will also be recording this webinar, if there are no objections, to make it available afterwards to people who were not able to attend today's webinar. Thanks a lot.
Hello everybody, to this webinar about developing executable test suites for the validator. The webinar is divided into 3 parts. We give a short introduction, then we have a look on how test suites for data specification can be developed, and how test suites for web servers can be developed. So the status since the March meeting with the MIG-T subgroup that we added a new test driver for executing the WFS2 tests in the OGC team engine. We implemented the executable test suite for testing direct access download services. With the documentation for users, administrators, and developers, and made many improvements to the software to report the tests. And if you're interested in what has been improved, just check the links below in the GitHub repositories. And today we published the release candidate of the Inspire validator, but the testing of the reference validator and the executable test suite is still going. So this is how the current version of the validator looks like, and as you can see, the direct WFS and the OGC team tests have been added. And here the direct WFS have dependencies in the new OGC team engine test. So the approach how the test suites have been developed for the Inspire validator, I will jump over this slide to visualize this process. This slide, so the technical guidances specify technical implementations for the implement rules, and the requirements are stated in the technical guidances. The guidances group the requirements into conformance classes, and in cases wherein all requirements are organized in abstract test suites and agreed by the MICT validating working group. The test suites are publicly available in the ATS repository. And these abstract test suites, actual test suites, have been developed. These tests are containing executable test cases, which are itself containing assertions. Assertions are executed in the test engines and are interacting with the test object on a sufficiently detailed level. So to put it in the technical context of the Inspire test framework, the test framework looks detailed files. Test drivers are interacting via an application programming interface with the test engines and control and monitor the test engines. The test developer and executable test suites are loaded by the test engine to test either a service or a data set. The executable test suite repository is available on GitHub. The documentation is available at docs.etfvalidator.net. So now I'm hand over to PwC for the part of the developing test suite for data specifications.
Any questions about the previous part that has been presented till? Pedro Mendive, you have a question? No. Okay, if you want to ask something, could you please first unmute yourself? Because we can't hear you. Okay, so if there are no questions, we'll continue with the presentation. Let me first share my screen. So everybody, my name is Carmen van der Loo and I'm from PwC. So as John has specified, we can test both services and data sets. And I will do an explanation on how to develop test suites for data, so for the data specifications. Technical guidelines. There are three different types of tests that we seen. Firstly, there are the code lists. So in this kind of test, we want to check whether all the attributes that have a code list assigned to them are taking values that are set within these code lists. Next to there are also the constraints. For these, we want to check whether the features in the data set adhere to the constraints that are specified. And the same happens with the IR requirements. We want to check that the features that are in the data set adhere to the requirements which are contained in the implementing rules. And these compose in a generic in a geometry-related way. So let's shortly discuss the development process. As said, all the tests are documented in technical guidelines. From technical guidelines, we go to the abstract test suites and are the human readable form of these tests, and then translated to the executable test suites, which you can see are the computer readable version. If I can show you in real life, here you can see the technical guideline document. You might know this already. This is the one for the administrative units one, and it specifies everything that you need to know about. Is it still sharing? No. I can see that my screen is not being shared anymore. Try again. Okay, perfect. So as I was saying, we have the technical guideline document, which specifies everything that we need to know about the data team. Here we have some our requirements that you can see. They are specified inside the blocks. As well, it contains the code lists and the constraints inside of this document. So all of this is translated into the abstract test suites and are documented on a GitHub repository. If you are in Google and you type in Inspire Validation GitHub, the results will take you to the page that you need to be. So you see that we have a data out folder, which has the abstract test suite on the administrative units. The same for data TN, which has the one on transport networks and so on. You also see eTest repository, so this one holds all the executable test suites for all the data teams. The abstract unit, test units abstract test suite repository. You see when I open one, for example, here the code list values, that's the requirement which is in the technical guideline is translated in here. Firstly, we start off with a purpose. So here, for example, it is to, as I said, that all the attributes adhere to the code list values. Then prerequisites to the test, they are mentioned here. So any other tests need to be done first before this one can be executed. Then part about the test methods, which specifies how the test should be executed. And important to note here is that this is a generic description, so it does depend on which language that you will code your test in the end. Every time it should follow this way of testing. A reference to the technical guideline and the IR requirements that it is validating at this point. We will specify if the test is of an automated or manual kind. Next, we say which kind of error messages that a user can expect during validation. And we already link to the executable test suites by specifying the path in which you can find the features that need to be tested during these tests. This is then translated into the executable test suite. So if I go to the repository, here I can find all the executable test suites. If I go to the administrative units, you can see that here it is translated into actual code that can be run on a computer and do the test automatically. I'll let me back to the presentation now. Send you all three. Shortly, some requirements that need to be fulfilled during development. So currently, the executable test suites have been developed using xQuery and XML. So you're familiar with that, and as well with the ETF model in general. The development itself is done in an application called BaseX. I can shortly show you this one as well. It looks like this. On the top, you provide few parameters that you want to specify during your testing. You just want to develop your ETSs, and when you run it, you can get on the left-hand side here on the bottom some information about the compilation and your evaluation of the tests that you have compiled. As well, on the right, you can see the actual results that the features he finds or doesn't find according to the tests that you have written. Here for a second for any questions that you might have. Okay. The thing I want to note here is that for development, there is also some documentation available, but we'll still explain this more later on. So look into an example now. We have an example for each three of the types of tests that I mentioned, for the code list, the conformance, and the IR requirements. And they are all about administrative units. So according to the directive, an administrative unit can be defined as a dividing area where member states have and/or exercise jurisdictional rights. I've also provided you here with a link to the technical guidelines, the abstract test suites, and the executable test suites for the administrative units for reference later on.
There's a question from Elisabetta.
There is a question from Elisabetta. Please pose it. Elia, we cannot hear you. You read it in the chat if this is more convenient for you. And read later, okay? So let's move on for the moment. So we will start with explaining to you how to develop an ACS for the code list. So as said before, the purpose of a code list test is to check whether when a feature, when an attribute has a code list to it, whether it takes the values that are set in this code list. Our technical guideline, all the code lists are included in the XC, but all code lists are formally documented on the Inspire Code Lists registry. So this is a website, and you can see the codes that is applicable to the administrative unit. One code list here, which is called the administrative hierarchy level, and it specifies which hierarchy level, so which level of the pyramid of administrative structures an administrative unit is. As you can see, there are 6 orders of level that an administrative unit can be. So look at the test suites for the code lists. We can see that we first specify our purpose as verifying whether the attributes take out the values in the code list. Or we also mention these levels, but as that the recognition of it will always be in the registry as shown before, and specify to which attribute it applies. So here we can see that our national attribute level of the administrative unit needs to adhere to this code list. So look at the executable code for this. We see that an administrative unit is selected and is checked whether the national level attribute is adhering to the code, set out in the code list. I'd also like to show you this in the validator itself after it has been implemented. This is the validator as such. So here, as the code list is part of the application schema of administrative units, let me go to the administrative unit application schema and say I will use this one and start test. I have to give it a data set to test upon, and I've created a data here just for this webinar, so I'm choosing this file. And I'll start the test. It will give me some features that are actually not adhering to the values that are set in the code list. The test is running. It will give you also some information about the test running. And then you get the results. So here I click open the application schema administrative unit. I see that the code list values are having some features that are not complying to it. Here I can see that the administrative unit R004 is referring to the code list because here it's specified to be of the 7th order. But as shown before, there is only 1st till 6th order in the code list. So it has been asserted as not being adhering to the code list. Questions at this point about this type of test? Results that have been for validator after running it. Do you have a question?
Here. Just a comment and a question. The comment was when you showed the abstract test suite, it had two versions, let's say, of the data specifications in it, the version 3 and the version 4 of the schemas that we use for the data specifications. And the big change that we have between version 3 and version 4 is the way in which code lists are encoded in the schemas. One is basically as text in version 3 and as a URI reference in version 4. That's why you have problems in there. I wanted to test if somebody is wondering, having a close look at that. The question is, can you go back to the editor and explain in a bit more what is happening in the when you are developing the tests, and explain a bit more on what's actually happening in the editor?
Is XU mean?
Yes. Yes.
On the top, we basically specify to the base X in which repository that the files are stored. So here you can see that I'm referring to a folder in my own computer locally where I have the executable test suites stored. That you also refer to the data sets that we're testing. So this is the same data set that I just uploaded in the live validator. Also on my local computer I have it. And then here, these 3 parameters on line 304, you specify which tests you actually want to run. So whether you want to run an administrative unit test on the application schema or data consistency or other. As in the left-hand side, you can see whether the compilation of the tests have been successful. So, for example, if development there are some errors inside of your file, this will not compile, of course. And on the right-hand side, you see the output of the test as such, show the same as in the validator that is hosted online, but format as such. Clemmer, anything you want to add to this?
Maybe to add to that, basically what you see in the editor is the X query. So as Jon has mentioned earlier, there are the software is supporting different testing And the reason for that is that things that we want to test have different characteristics. And for example, here for the data tests, a data set may be tens of gigabytes in size. So you need a specific tool, and that's why we're using BaseX, which is an open source XML database. And the file that you see open is an XQuery. So it's basically an query is executed that runs the tests and tests each of the assertions against these files. There is a second file that is not shown here, which Carm had shown earlier in the browser. It actually has the structure of the test cases, the test assertions, and has a small snippet of the specific query that is executed for that test. And basically, when you execute the OGGeo XQuery that is shown, it basically reads that other XML file and executes all the different assertions, XQuery statements of the assertions. There are also different files. This no OGGeo means that no geometry test is done, so no spatial index is built. That speeds up the process. In other cases, when you do spatial tests, there's another XQuery for that case, which also makes use of spatial indexing, etc. I think that's about it for me to add.
Thanks, both of you.
I saw in the right-hand panel that there are some more questions. Martin Tushina, you have some questions. I saw you already posted two of them in chat. Do you want to elaborate on those, and then we can give a proper answer?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Right, Martin. Could you maybe speak up a little?
Oh, so maybe we can see with the question in the chat. Thank you.
Okay. I see also another question from Danielle before his, so maybe we quickly go through the questions in the order that we have here. So the question is how to test a data set that contains features from multiple data themes. So in the validator, if you use the web app, then simply execute the test from more than one conformance class, so more than one executable test suite, and that is the test for administrative units and addresses, and the data set has administrative units and addresses, then those tests will be executed and test the specific requirements. Of course, the administrative unit test only tests the administrative unit spatial objects, and the address test the address spatial objects. To Martin's first question, doesn't that for the data sets there will be no single ETS test classified based on themes and the application schemas? Be sure understand the question. So basically, let me try to explain it. So basically, there are some generic tests that are theme independent, and the structure comes from basically from the abstract test suite in the data specification. So there are tests related to the application schemas, tests related to information accessibility. So when you have links to coordinate reference system or a code list, whether that is real, etc. So there are several categories also on reference systems, and these all exist in a generic theme-independent way, which is basically things that are covered in the template of the data specifications or the D.7, the guidelines for the encoding. So these are the generic tests, theme-dependent, and then on top of that you have specific tests like the code list test, which is theme-specific, and that is executed. The test also executes the generic tests. So I'm not sure if that answers the question. Otherwise, maybe to clarify that. The second one, with the graphical user interface, you're into the graphical user interface of base X, I assume, or the base X user interface that known, that is of course base X tool, or are you referring to the user interface of the application? Could you clarify that?
You mean now?
I mean, you're not very loud, but I can hear you.
Okay, I was referring actually to graphical user interface of validator itself, meaning that going back to the first question, it was from the user perspective, from our side expected that we will be able to pick up the relevant theme, select the appropriate application schema, and execute the test, and then see the results of the test. Mainly speaking with the decision makers and some people who have some technical background, it would be very useful to have some graphical visualization also of the results of the validation in combination with some graphical elements, not just the text strings, which sometimes rest very high specific knowledge as on the data specification side, as well as on the generic interoperability documents. So it's not easy task, but if there is a possibility to make it more similar, then it would be very welcome. So thanks a lot.
I mean, there is an open discussion on that, how it can be simplified, because right now it's of conformance classes and test suites that exist, and to simplify the different approaches, how to select what you actually want to test. That is a known open point, and it's one of the issues that is actually in the issue tracker. And also Lorena and JRC were also looking into how can we simplify, let's say, that you have a relatively easy entry in selecting what you want to test and initiate the test. To understand really, I mean, since you're testing technical things, so to really understanding the reports in detail, you will require some technical know-how. But of course, the other thing then how to send a high-level message that's able, if it can be identified how that should be done. I think that's also part of the things that documented in the GitHub issue tracker. Lorena or anyone from GRC, if you want to add something to that.
Maybe just to say that this is of course important for us to get feedback and suggestions and ideas on how we can improve both the functionality but also the appearance and user interface of the validator. There will be a workshop at the Inspire conference where we will be presenting this tool and basically give people the chance to test it directly hands-on, let's say. And we will then use that workshop, for example, to try and gather some more ideas and feedback on what could be improved in terms of maybe different visualizations for management or the like of the results in the end. Also, that is one of the tasks of the new working group that we want to establish under the MIG work program, where basically we want to have this group help us to gather suggestions and feedback on the further development of the tool.
So, Carl, regarding your question, in that specific case that we've just seen, the list of possible values is fixed. So the test it only checks, I mean, one of the value must be one of the values in the Inspire codelist register. We go to Annex 2 and Annex 3, where in general it will be either completely open, then you can't really only test if the value is reachable, or if there are specific extension mechanisms that are mandated, and that would have to be tested in the specific test. But for almost all of the Annex 1 code lists, except for in protected sites, list is complete at the moment. So the test is only against the values in the code list register. Okay, from Stefan is already. I think this is responding to that. So it is based open. Well, really, I think that everybody has access to is not exactly the version that is shown here, the demo Inspire Next version, but that's basically then project closure when the version that is shared with all of you, if that is accessible, when we will update the software in that version. But to get the extra credentials, you have to send an email to the email address that Robin has put in the chat. Okay, with that we can continue.
So I've explained you the code list tests. So look at the constraints. So as said before, the purpose of these tests is to check that the features that are in the data set adhere to the constraints specified in the application schema. So our constraints can be found in the technical guidelines in the feature catalog. And for the administrative units, there are 3 constraints in total. I take a look at the abstract test suite. Here, we can see that we again first start off with specifying the purpose. So check that all the features are indeed adhering to the constraints that are specified. Then to the test methods, and that we will verify all the OCL constraints, so all object constraint language specified constraints that are specific to this UML model of the application schema. As you can see, all 3 tests are here specified, so you have the 3 bullet points per test. I will take a bit of time to explain you the first one here, which is the administrative unit's highest level test. So what we're trying to test here is that a unit which is of the highest level does refer to a unit at a higher level, because he is already of the highest level. So what is done in the test is that when an administrative unit is of level 1, so first order, checking whether or not it is referencing something in the upper level unit. And so it is set to be not adhering to the constraint. So when you look at this executable test suite, it's like the following here. So that we are taking the administrative unit and seeing that it does not refer to anything else in the upper level units. Questions? Let's first show you also the output in the validator. So it's also a test in the application schema, so I can just in there go to the test reports that are already generated and the one that we just run together before. Again, I will open the application schema, and now I will look into the constraints. And you see that there was indeed an error in the no unit at highest level can associate units at a higher level part. And here you can see that the administrative unit AU002 is referencing to AU01, and both of the same level of the first level. So this is not okay and should be fixed, of course. Are there questions regarding this test? You can see that there's one side of the shed. No automatic translation from the OCL to the X-query. So this is done by what is inside of the abstract test suite. As we said before, here we specify how the test should look like, and this is then translated into the executable test suite. Are there questions? Do you want to add anything on this?
No, I think that's basically just the abstract test which already identifies the X-queries, the XPath, basically the XPath statements that need to be tested. So implementing that then in the ETS is basically relatively straightforward, and in most cases the OCLs are also not that complicated. That's why we're using basically a manual process and haven't tried to use anything automated with shape change. There is also another from Roland Grillmeier on top. I don't know, Robin, Michael, yeah, all right, we already have an answer on that one in the chat. So yeah, thank you, Carmen.
Okay, are there any other questions on this test? Not, I will, no. Okay, then I will show you the last type of test. Oh, one too far. Is there a requirement? So, as I said before, these are the requirements which are contained in the implementing rules, and these exist in two ways. There are the generic ones, and they are the ones that relate to the geometry of features, and the latter one is the one that we would like to discuss with you today. Just to say, all the IR requirements are included in the S1 of the technical guidelines. So let's take a look at the geometry test that we would like to discuss with you today. Going to the GitHub repository, and the constraint that we would like, the test that we'd like to discuss with you today is one that specifies that an administrative unit should not have an area overlapping with another administrative unit which has the same national level. So two units at the same level should not share any area in a geographical point of view. So it's actually tested is that the geometry of each administrative unit is taken, and it is compared to the geometries of all the other administrative units at the same level of hierarchy. And there is an overlap. It is said that this one is not adhering to this test. Now, in the coding of geometry tests, there's the GML-JOX module that you need to also install on your computer to be able to them, as we are now testing on geometry, and this requires some extra capabilities from your computer. Here you can see the test translated into the code. As I said before, we take the administrative unit, each of them, and we're going to check if there are no units at the same level that have a geometry which is overlapping with that one we have selected. So we'll take a look in the validator. Test belongs to the data consistency of the administrative units. So we will use that one. Again, I'm going to select the same file. The report again, we can click open the results and see that the area 1 has an error. That has 2 messages, but I want to discuss this with you in the PowerPoint. I have copied it there, and I have also provided there a small presentation for you. So you can see here we have the 2 messages that were previously in the validator. And I've also drawn out the 4 administrative units which are in the data set that we are using today to show to you, so that you can more easily see what is going on. So as you can see here, there is an error on administrative unit 001, administrative unit 002. So it is saying that these 2 are overlapping. And you can see this on the right-hand side, that they have an overlap, and they are both of the level 1. So this is why they are having an error. But I also see the administrative unit 002 and 004 are having an overlap. However, these are not being set to be in error because they are not of the same level. So thus it is okay that they have an overlap. Items on this. No questions? No question I see. This one?
I'm not sure whether there are any requirements somewhere implemented are the requirements or the constraints that are listed in the data specs. I'm not sure that there are any concerns on gaps.
I think so.
I mean, if there would be, you could test it. Of course, you would need to know what area is. I mean, of course, you could test for holes, etc. in all, but I don't think there is any requirement in the data specification.
Any questions? We'll hand the floor to John and Clemens to cover the part of the webinar for today.
Okay. So a quick look on how web services can be tested using the SOAP UI test driver. And SOAP UI is a tool which comes in 2 flavors. There's one commercial pro version and one open source version, and we're using the open source version, the Inspire validator in version 5.3, together with the ETF SOAP UI extension library. And loaded at these links. Here are the technical guidances for implementing Inspire download services, the abstract test suite for services, and the test suites in the ETS repository. This is how the graphical user interface of SOAP UI looks like. I don't go too much in detail here. On the left-hand side, you can see that the Inspire workspace is open, and the pre-executable test suite also implemented in the Inspire validator. So for a live demo, we pick one abstract test suite for the predefined WFS, and we take one test case for testing if the extended capabilities exist in the capability document. The abstract test suite states here that the extended capabilities element must exist, and that response validates against the Inspire download service schema. And if the validation passes and the extendabilities element exists, passes, and otherwise the test fails. So this will be implemented in SOAP UI. First, we need an interaction with the web service. We need to request the capability document, and we have to run multiple assertions, one for checking if no exception was returned, the extended capabilities element exists, and the response validates against the schema. The SOAP tool, and we will create a new project in this tool. And we do not want to start from scratch. We're opening a module, and this to the executable test suite. I will explain later what this test module does. There's one convention for executable test suites in SOAP UI that we need a service endpoint property. And this service endpoint property to a test service. Right module. And what this test module actually does, it checks if the service is up and running, if the capabilities document is returned, and if the operation endpoints get feature and describe feature type are available. So this test is running. Our test suite. And test here. And a test case. To interact with the test object, an HTTP request to request the capability document, and we are using the set in the executable test suite. And we execute the test step, we get a response from the service. So now we can run assertions on response, and first we add assertion for checking if the service returns an exception report, and so the assertion passes. If some invalid to the URL, the service will respond with an exception and or the assertion will fail. Next, if we have a look at the app test suite for the extended capabilities, at the app test case for the extended capabilities, we have here the need to check if the extended capabilities element is in the capabilities. And to this, we are using the assert object, which is part of the ETF extension library. Code from the develop documentation now, and the assertion. And we now look at the documentation for the assert class. See that there is an exist function. We use now assertion, and the exist function expects two parameters. One for the XPath expression, and there's a second parameter from the translation template. The translation template is a reference to an error code. And, this reference is resolved by the ETF test framework. The ETS repository created a translation template, a message that says that a specific inspire element is missing, and with this XPath, and that to check the inspire extended capabilities. So we use this error code here. And what the assert class actually does, it returns the terms for this, and the tokens are replaced in the response. So you can see here we have the language property that is set to the English language, and we also can provide error messages in other languages too. So the complete assertion looks like. We run it. To complete the test, we also need to check if response validates against the schema, and therefore we can use this assertion. We validate the response against the schema. And the assertion has to. How does it look like in the inspire validator? Executed in the inspire validator. see here in the when you evaluate all details, you see expression of the assertion, and this is what has been added here in the SOAP tool. And this looks like when the intended capabilities element does not exist, and the entire validator returns an error message for it. So as you can see here, the tokens in the relation template elements and have replaced the tokens from our assert functions, and it has to extend the capabilities and the correct XPath. And so far,
not in that.
Okay. The SOAP UI ETF extension library adds for validating the responses against a schema, and an assertion for checking for version reports. Also, the third class, which provides functionalities similar to JUnit. I've also shown how the translation templates can be used. This documented in the executable test suite, develop executable test suites documentation, which is available at docs.etfvalidator.net. Okay.
Okay, that concludes the presentation. Any questions on the last part?
That's okay. So the actually, I share my screen. 1 second. I can execute what I've shown here. You also can execute this in the inside validator, and a URL, and it we tested with the SOAP UI test engine. And you also have a REST API for data that you can use to execute tests in the inside validator with a REST interface. Answer your question?
Robin, I think Dennis' question is probably a question to you.
Yes. Sorry. I'm not quite sure what's the background to the question, but maybe one thing that I didn't say very clearly at the beginning when we did the introduction is that the one or the main reason why we started this whole activity some 3 years ago in the first place was basically that there were a number of developers of validators in different member states, as a side product of the work on the geoportal here at the JRC, and they're giving slightly different results sometimes. So we basically, there was a strong push from the MIG at the time to develop, let's say, a commonly agreed interpretation through the abstract test suite, and to develop a common tool in order to avoid that there's overlaps in efforts being spent on developing validator, and that we have a common agreed view on how to interpret and test the requirements in the technical guidelines. The main reason behind that is really to help implementers in the member states to understand how they are doing against the technical specifications, and in a way it's a way of using the technical guidelines for the implementation. Is basically to check your implementation against the validation tool, and to go through the error reports and to improve on your implementation based on the feedback that you get from the validator. It's primarily thought of as a checking tool that the Commission will use with the implementers in the member states. I mean, we wouldn't even have the resources to do that. There's no intention of doing that, to checking all the services. So it really is meant as a tool for implementers to check their own implementation and to see where there's things that need to be improved against the specifications.
Any other questions or comments? We are moving, since if we have any specific questions, we are probably moving to, let's say, open discussion at the end. I guess that's another, I don't know, Martin, if you want to add something to that, or...
I can say a few words on Martin's comment again. Yes, I agree that there is some relation, let's say, in the recent with the recent discussions that we've had in the MIG around the question of, let's say, automating a bit more the end reporting that's done by the member states. And as those of you who are in the MIG-T or in the MIG know, there is an activity ongoing to make the reporting of the member states on their Inspire implementation more automatic, and to create some kind of dashboards mainly based on the metadata that is provided on the data sets in the national discovery services. So, of course, as part of that activity, we can think about using this common validator to provide the indicators of compliance and non-compliance. But as we said before, it's at least initially is mainly used, thought of as a tool to help implementers. And I think basically looking at 100% conformity is not clearly the only goal of success or the measure of success of the infrastructure. So there's of course other things that need to be looked at in order to make an infrastructure successful. So it could be one of the aspects to look at in the bigger picture of the reporting on or the monitoring of the implementation in the member states, but we need to look at other things as well, and to see how the data can actually be used for specific application areas. The question on from Daniel said we're still missing a number of tests, including for view services, WMS, and the portrait thing as well. So that's some of the things that are still missing and would still need to be developed as in the next phase of the development. we launched a little questionnaire with the MIG representatives to understand what, from their point of view, should be the things that we should be looking at with priority. So there's like 8 or 9 missing pieces still to complete the full technical guideline, all the technical guidelines. And we basically asked the member states for their view on where we should start and what we should be looking at priority. So that is something that's ongoing, or basically launched today. And based on that input, we will try to prioritize the things that are most urgently needed or requested by member states. On the last question from Emilio and Paloma, the AI is not yet connected to the modeling, but potentially it could be done. That is something that we need to look into and discuss with the member states, I think. Are there any more questions? Can I ask Jens whether you have the emails of all the participants? And if not, it could be nice of everyone that haven't provided their details as an email to us at the ARENA email that we put in, and we can maybe put it again in the chat for any follow-up that we may want to do about this webinar, so that we may run a little questionnaire to find out who of you might be interested in any potential follow-up activities. We've been discussing the possibility to maybe organize a more in-depth hands-on training workshop with those that are really interested in providing an additional or developing additional tests for specific themes, services, and so on, and potentially keep you up to date with any future developments. So, do you have all the emails of the participants?
I believe I have everyone's email address, but alternatively, everyone who wants to receive updates can also leave their email address in the chat box, and then we can easily collect all the email addresses after the webinar as well.
If you don't want to put your email in the chat, please just send us an email at the ARENA email that I'll put in the chat again now, and I will get in touch with you for any follow-up of this webinar. Okay, it seems that there are no further questions, so I would like to thank everyone again for joining us so numerously for this webinar. Thanks also to the presenters, Jan, Clemens, Jens, and Carmen. Well, we hope that we've raised some interest, at least in some of you, to help us develop the missing tests for this validator over the coming year or so, and or to test the first version of the validator that will be released over the summer before the Inspire conference. And as I said, if you're interested in having a closer look, there'll be a workshop at the Inspire conference in September. You basically will be able to bring your own data sets and or service endpoints and basically try out the tool directly and provide feedback directly to us in Strasbourg. Well, I'm going to be in Kiel, actually. Okay. Thanks, Dan. I'll post in the email again because it got a bit lost during all the emails, so we'll put in the chat. If you want to As your email, please send it to the Arena email address. But it's like everybody has put in their email already. So thanks a lot again, and have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.